It has just been like the weirdest day. Like, I feel like I've been walking around in circles all day, like not knowing what I'm supposed to be doing with myself. And then I got dressed and ready, and I realized like everything in my wardrobe today is like pink, and it weirded me out. But I'm here now, so let's do it, I guess. Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today we're doing film versus book again. This is only the second time I've done this. The first time I did it, I don't know. I don't think any of y'all liked it. Let's try it again. We'll see. I really like doing these book to film comparisons, but yeah, maybe I should just do them because I like them. I feel like that's just like a metaphor for life, isn't it? You should just do it if it makes you happy, regardless of what other people think. Y'all, I'm in a weird mood today. Sorry. Okay, so we're gonna talk about the book Red Sky and Mourning by Tami Oldham Ashcraft. It was also re-released as Adrift when the movie came out in 2018. So we're gonna be comparing the book Adrift, aka Red Sky and Mourning, with the film Adrift starring Shailene Woodley. I watched the film in 2018 when it came out, and I didn't realize that it was a book. And so when I realized it was a book, I added it to my TBR, and it sat in my TBR until last month. I talked about it a little bit in my August wrap up, and I was like, you know what, I really need, if I'm gonna do the film comparison thing, I really need to do it like right away before the book kind of like fades out of my brain. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. I sat down the other night, rented the movie, watched it fresh again, and so here I am ready to talk about the film and the book together. If y'all been in my channel a moment, you know that I do no spoilers. That is not the case today. We are getting into it. There's spoilers. We're going to be talking all about the book, all about the film. I know this isn't like a super popular book or anything like that, or a super popular film, so like if you haven't seen it yet and you want to see it, this is your warning. We're getting into it, okay? This is not spoiler free today. So if you're still here, we're going to talk about the book first, then about the film, then about the book and the film together. Okay, so let's start. So, like I said, this book was originally released as Red Sky and Mourning by Tami Oldham Ashcraft, and it was re-released in, not re-released, they did a republishing of it in 2018 when the film was coming out, so now the book and the film match. This is Tami's story of how she got her mastless boat to safety after a hurricane hit it. Okay, so getting into the book right away, I really like the way the book was laid out because it literally started at the beginning of Tami's story and then up to when she meets Richard, and then we're jumping back and forth between her being on the boat after the hurricane hit it, like after it had capsized and everything, and her story. So I just thought the writing was, like the way that they put together the book was pretty interesting, because obviously if you're reading the book you want to know about how Tami got the boat to safety. So yeah, most books would be like, this is the beginning, this is the middle, and this is the end. And the middle part would be where Tami and Richard take the boat to go to San Francisco. But that's not the way that they set up the book, and I was really grateful that they did it, because that's kind of like the high point or the action point of the book is the boat capsizing. So we get to learn all about Tami and her travels. She started off in Mexico with a friend, and then she just kind of like took off from there. She got a job on a boat, being a cook, and she got to go around and see the world. And at some point in her travel, she ended up in Tahiti. At this point, she had been out on the ocean before with like groups of friends, sailing. She knew quite a bit about sailing. When she landed in Tahiti, she was running a business with a friend fixing up boats. I forget now what they call it, but basically like people that refinish boats. That's what she was doing, and that's when she met Richard. And at the time, Richard was kind of like doing these odd boating jobs. He had his own boat, but he was kind of doing return business too, which Tami had also done, which is like when really rich people say they need a boat delivered somewhere and they pay you to deliver it. So they'd each done jobs like that on their own. They met, and this beautiful love story just like blossomed for them, and we really get into all the places that they went together. Like, their love story was just beautiful to me. I fell in love with Tami and Richard's love story. Like, it just felt like magic. And kudos to the person that ghost wrote this book, because it was just you could feel it. You could feel the love between them. Like, it was just that once in a lifetime kind of love, and they just had such spirit, like, for each other and for traveling. And I forgot to mention this, but it's like in the 80s, so it was like a completely different time to be internationally traveling. I feel like it was just so much more like community, in a sense, like people who kind of had this nomadic lifestyle. Like, you had this nomadacy, you know, but there was also this like community of people that did this, and I really loved getting to read about that and reading about all the places they went together. So in between reading about Tami's story and how she met Richard, we're also like flashing back to what's happening on the boat. So at some point, Tami and Richard get hired to take a boat from Tahiti to San Francisco. Tami's actually not too keen on going. She doesn't really want to go back to California, which is where she's originally from, and she wasn't ready to like go home and do all that kind of stuff yet. Like, her and Richard were in the middle of their travels. Like, they had plans, they had places they wanted to go, and a lot of things like traveling like that by boat really depends on like the season too. Like, there's good seasons to be out on the open ocean, and there's bad seasons to be out on the open ocean. So a lot of what they were planning was revolving around the seasons. Tami wasn't really ready to go, but it was like a really big chunk of money, and it basically was going to be able to fund their travels for another year. So it kind of seemed like a silly opportunity to pass up, because like it was a lot of money and it was really easy. And they'd both done jobs like this, but they'd never done this specific job together. So they were like, okay, yeah, let's just do it. Well, they get out there, and what started out as just kind of like a small storm escalated into a hurricane, and they're trying to like figure out how to go around it, maybe drop below it, maybe go above it. And they do make a lot of progress and try and like outrun this hurricane, but it basically hits them pretty hard. They get stuck right on the edge of it, and Richard tells Tami to go below. He's hooked onto the boat, and then the boat capsizes, and when she wakes up, like, the main mast is down, Richard is missing, and his tether line is empty. They make it known right away, Richard is not on that boat. Richard did not survive. She accepts this immediately, that Richard is gone, because there's nothing. There's not even a lot of wreckage from her boat. There's not even a lot of wreckage around where she is. Like, everything has really calmed down. She's pretty badly injured, and she has to figure out what she's going to do next. And so while we're learning about Tami and Richard's story, we're also learning about how Tami's going to get this boat to safety, because now it's just about survival. There's not a lot she can do, like, to fix it, but she does her best. This part of the book kind of like didn't work that well for me because it was boring. I mean, I hate to say that, but I don't really know a lot about sailing. I don't know a lot of the terminology or anything like that. And so as she was kind of like explaining stuff, I was just like, yeah. They did make it extremely digestible, but I would say that this was basically the lull in the book, because also there wasn't a lot that she could do. I mean, she was out on the open ocean for 40 plus days, I think. There wasn't a whole lot she could do besides survive, which meant rationing her food and adjusting her coordinates, and that was it. So like, that was a large part of the book, was just kind of going through some of the days with her, which were all kind of monotonous. While she's out to sea, she hears a voice with her. She has like a few different names that she references, like she'll call it just the voice or a guardian angel, or sometimes she'll say it's the voice of Richard or the voice of a guardian or something. And it's basically just someone for her to talk to. Obviously it was just kind of like her own self-conscious or something like that. And just the moments between her and this other entity or whatever that she was sharing her thoughts with was sometimes really entertaining and sometimes really sad. And so that kind of kept the pace up a little bit. Eventually, Tami makes it to safety. She makes it like all the way to a port in Hawaii before someone was like, hey, maybe we should pull that lady in and like help her out. At this point, she's been out there for a really long time and she's just like decimated, basically. Like, she was really badly injured in the initial capsize, so they helped her with that. And then, you know, she was finally able to reunite with her family and everything like that. I talked about this a little bit in my August wrap-up. I did not really like the ending of the book. And I really had to, like, school myself a little bit. Because this was, like, Tami's life. Like, it wasn't, like, fiction. It wasn't made up or anything. Like, this was her actual life. This actually happened to her. And however she reacted to being back and moving on and all this other stuff, I would never understand how she did any of that because it's not happened to me. So I won't comment too heavily on the ending of the book. It was just, I had issues. And that's just me. Yeah, I really loved the love story between Tami and Richard. I think on the page it came off really well. And other than that, I thought the pacing was done really well. And I really enjoyed hearing about Tami's survival story. If you like survivalist books, this was definitely a good one. I think it read really well. Okay, now that I've like blathered on about the book for like ages, let's talk about the film. So it stars Shailene Woodley as Tami, and it does start off a lot slower. Like, she comes off terribly younger in the film than she does in the book. Like, when I first started the film, I was like, man, they're really like making her look like she's like 18, 19. And we get further into the film and she says that she's been traveling around for 5 years, but they don't talk about the kind of experience that she has. She describes herself as an amateur sailor, that she worked on a boat as a cook, all of which things happen in the book. She meets Richard and they are together a couple of months, and then they get offered a job to take the boat back to San Francisco from Tahiti. At this point in the film, they're just planning out all their adventures, but it didn't really seem like they had gone on very many adventures, like maybe to a couple little getaways, but they were firmly rooted in Tahiti, as it seemed like they were living there together on his boat, the Maialuga. The film opens up with the crash immediately, and we're just kind of jumping around like in the book from the crash to like laying the foundation work for Richard and her's life together. And when she wakes up, she's a little bit injured. It doesn't really seem that bad until later, but immediately she goes looking for Richard, and then she sees a little boat, the dinghy, that came with the boat that they're sailing, and she sees him on it with her binoculars. And so she goes to setting the boat right in any way that she can, enough to get over to collect him. And she does. And Richard is severely injured. He's got like a broken leg, busted up ribs. She grabs him, drags him on board, and takes care of him for a really, really long time, and argues with him, and they come up with the plan to go to Hawaii, which is where she's gonna be picked up and rescued. While we're going back and forth between what's happening now and what's happened between Richard and Tami to get them to this point, in the film they make it very clear that Tami does not want to go on this trip. She was very negative about going back to San Francisco. And at this point, it didn't really seem like they were involved that long, because she was like ready to walk away from Richard. She was like, I don't want to just be tagging along on your adventures. Like, basically, I am a main character, and this is not main character energy. That's what she was giving off to me. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, girl, don't settle. But in the other part of my mind is like, you really just gonna like walk away from him? Like, you could just wait. It's only gonna take him like a month to take that boat and come back. Like, what were you doing anyway? Cleaning other people's boats? Waiting for your life to begin? I don't know. I had mixed feelings at this point about Shailene Woodley's reaction to Richard. Obviously, eventually he convinces her to go, and they go together. And at some point while they're out delivering the boat, he proposes to her. She says yes. It's actually like a really awkward scene. I didn't care for it. The whole time we're going back and forth. And then eventually, Shailene Woodley as Tami says, like, Richard, I have to let you go now. And that's when we figure out that Richard's not really there. He hasn't been there the whole time. He was never there. She was talking to nobody. So that whole moment where she swims out and she picks him up, none of it happened. And we find out that Richard was really lost at sea, and she's been on that boat by herself. Which the first time you watch it is just like utterly devastating. Because you're sitting there thinking that Richard's like alive, and then it flashes back on all these scenes where they're together and she's really alone. Devastating. Of course, like, the second time I watched it, like, I already knew Richard was dead and, like, read the book and everything, so it was like, it was still sad, though. It was still sad, like, that was, like, her coping mechanism, and eventually she was like, I can't keep pretending that you're here, basically. Then she gets rescued outside, like, she can see Hawaii off in the distance, and a boat is like out there pretty far from shore, and they take her in. And the end of the film ends pretty abruptly after that. Like, it's just a shot of her back on the Mayaluga, which is the boat that Richard built. And that's kind of it. And then it just kind of rolls the credits, and it shows some pictures of, you know, real life Tami and real life Richard together, and the boat, the Mayaluga, and all this other stuff. So yeah, the movie pretty much ended after that. Okay, so let's talk about, like, the film versus the book. Comparison time, right? So, I think they did a good job with the film. Stuck pretty close to the story. There were some really great moments when it was like, this is definitely, like, straight from the book. They did a good job. I didn't know that Shailene Woodley was a producer for the for the film. Sorry. I watched it the second time. My complaints. They really did not give Tami enough credit. Like, Tami had her own life, her own stuff. Like, she was an experienced sailor by the time that she met Richard. Like, in the film, they made it kind of seem like she knew how to sail, but that Richard taught her a lot. Which, you know, is not untrue, but it's false. In the book, like, in real life, Tami was very experienced. Like, she did work as a cook on a boat, and that's how she ended up falling in love with sailing. But, like, shortly after that, she went out on other excursions with other people that hired her on. And at one point in the book, she was working with a man on a boat, and he screwed up their coordinates. And this was very early on in her, like, nomadic journey. And in the book, she said, like, that was the last time I ever relied on anybody to make coordinates. And so she went into, like, full learner mode and learned how to do all of that stuff, because she decided that she wasn't going to rely on other people. Because, yeah, which, good for her. They really didn't go into that in the movie, and I was a little disappointed because it made it just seem like Tami was in Mexico, and then she got to Tahiti, and then she stayed in Tahiti, and she'd been there, like, waiting for the next thing. When it's like, that's not at all what she was doing. And that's just how I'm looking at it. That could not have been how they wanted it to come off, but that's how I was seeing it. In the book, Tami and Richard were actually together for a while before they decided to do this. Like, they had already started traveling together. They had been out on the Mayaluga. They had made lots of friends. They had been together a while before they decided to do this whole excursion back to San Francisco. So it was a little bit of a shock when I was watching the film and, like, they'd only been together a couple of months. I was like, no. And how they were, like, planning out all of their journeys and stuff. In the book, they'd already been on a lot of journeys together, and that was something I really loved about the book, was getting to, like, see all of the amazing things that they had seen, like going to all the places they'd been and seeing all the culture, and, like, it was a really cool part of the book. Like, it was like going on a little mini adventure, like, every couple of chapters, like, talking about all the places that they went. So that was really exciting, and I was kind of bummed that they made it seem like they hadn't done all that stuff in the movie. One really big gripe I had about the film, they made these really weird familial decisions for Richard and Tami. In the book, Tami does not talk about her childhood negatively, and she does mention at one point that she was raised by her grandparents for a little while, but she does not talk about why. She does not talk about anything like that. And in the movie, Shailene Woodley talks a lot about how her mom had her when she was super young. She lived with her grandparents because her mother didn't want to take care of her. She had a dad that was in and out of the picture and eventually kicked completely out of the picture. And that the reason that she wanted to leave San Francisco when she turned 18 is because she could not put up with her weird family anymore. Something like that. That is not at all how it came across in the book, and I was really disappointed that they kind of, like, made up all of this stuff. Maybe that's really what happened to Tami, and not to put it into the book, but decided to put it into the film. But that's just such a weird thing to, like, not include in your memoir, but include in a book based off your memoir. And then for Richard, they, like, made this super sad story about how his mom killed himself when he was 7? No. No. That was not in the book. In fact, like, Tami went and met his parents after the crash, way after. Is at the end of the book that I don't like talking about. But she actually met his parents after that. So, like, no, she was alive. There was no, like, traumatizing, like, death. I think they were trying to make it look like they both had these traumatizing experiences, and that's why they led this, like, nomadic life where they didn't want to be tied down, where they wanted to just be going all the time. And I think they wanted to, like, give Tami and Richard a reason to be that way, when it's like, there's just people that are like that. There's legitimately people who just like to travel, who love that nomadic lifestyle, that want to see every inch of the earth. They're like, it doesn't have to be, like, caused by some traumatic experience, or that you don't like your family or something like that. Like, you can have a perfectly normal childhood, perfectly happy existence, and still want to see the world. Yeah, I don't really know where they were going with that. I do know that it bothered me quite a bit because I don't know. I don't get why it was so important to put that in there. And for the record, Richard proposed to Tami before they were lost at sea. I think the way that they did the film was really visually interesting. Like, there wasn't really a moment when I thought, this isn't real. Like, they made it look really convincing. They made it look like they were out on the ocean a lot. And then at the very end of the film, they do, like, what they think happened to the boat when it capsized. That moment to me was super cool. I really liked that. It was kind of hard to get a visual of what Tami thought happened to the boat in the book because, like I said, she literally, like, the boat started to capsize and she blacked out. So she didn't actually remember any of that happening. So it was interesting to see how it all kind of went together. like what people thought it might look like and how they rendered it. I thought that was really interesting. The biggest complaint that other people have with the film, I read some reviews for the film, was that they really wanted to know more about what happened to Tami after the boat crashed, like after she got rescued, after she got to safety. And they get a lot more into that in the book about what Tami did after, how she moved on, how she recovered, all of those things. They get a lot more into it in the book. I will say in the film, like, it was like she got rescued and then the next thing you know, she's back in Tahiti on Richard's boat, and they don't talk about what happens next for her, except in the broad sense of like, oh, Tami keeps sailing every day. She got remarried and now she has a family, like stuff that happened like way in the future. But there's not any like immediate closure or anything like that. So yeah, if you want more about like what Tami did after she got rescued, it's in the book and you can read it. But yeah, overall I think this was a really decent adaptation. Like, I think the film did a really good job. I think that the way that they did it, where the inner voice that Tami was hearing in the book, they made it a physical representation of Richard. I thought that was a really good way to do it. It was very interesting. And then it made it even more devastating when you found out that he really wasn't there. Like, the whole time, he really wasn't there. It was just her on that boat, surviving, getting around, doing all the things. I thought it was a really good little twist, a really good creative nudge there. I thought it was great. That's all I really have to say. I've been like talking forever. If you guys want to see me do more of these book to film adaptation things, I actually read quite a bit of books that have been turned into films. Like, it's kind of like an obsession, a mild obsession, I would say. I'm not like obsessed, but like I do it quite a bit. So there is kind of a long list of books and films that I've kind of worked through. If you want to see me do more comparisons and stuff like that, let me know. I've got more that I can talk about. Hit all the buttons down below so that you know when I'm posting. I post every week. Today's been a weird day. But I made it. So that's all that matters. I made it here. I made the video, and that's all that matters. I did the thing. So if you want to see more, make sure you subscribe. Next week we're going to get into the October maybes, and I'm super excited. So yeah, I think I've probably said enough. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye!